happened when I was a kid, so some of the details are a little fuzzy, but I still remember the important parts. I grew up in Nebraska, and I used to bike to school every day because my parents were always working. It was just easier that way. We lived in a rural area surrounded by farmland, and the route to school took me past this massive cornfield. Looking back, it probably wasn't that big, but it was the kind of place that looked like it went on forever, especially when you're a kid. Our house was on the other side of the field, but my parents were always clear about one thing: don't cut through the cornfield. They were worried I'd get lost without a cell phone, and I didn't really question it. I'd seen how easy it was to lose your sense of direction in there. So every day, I'd stay on the main road and bike all the way around it. I didn't have many friends that lived near my house, so I'd always bike alone. I didn't mind the longer rides. I actually developed a love for biking from doing it so often. I'd go for bike rides on the weekends, even when I didn't have to. I don't remember what day of the week it was, but it was definitely a weekday because I was biking home from school. I was biking home like normal when the chain on my bike popped loose. I don't remember how it happened, but it just came off completely, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure out how to pop it back into place. My dad had taught me how to fix my bike, but nothing I tried worked. I was stuck, and the thought of walking all the way home with my bike in tow sounded awful. Like I said, I didn't have a phone back then, so it wasn't like I could just call my parents for help. I wasn't going to ask for a ride from a random stranger driving by either. I knew better. I was on my own. That's when I looked over at the cornfield. Walking the normal route home was going to take forever, but cutting through the cornfield would save me a ton of time. I knew my parents had warned me not to go in there, but I figured it couldn't be that hard to find my way through. After all, I just needed to walk straight, right? So I made up my mind and pushed my bike into the cornfield, telling myself it'd be a quick shortcut. At first, it was fine. The path I found between the rows of corn was narrow, but it was clear enough to walk through. The stalks towered over me, and I remember there being a gentle breeze that day. Imagine walking through a cornfield as a child. The stalks feel 10 times higher, and everything feels 10 times bigger. It started to make me feel a little uneasy. The corn also blocked out a lot of the light, and it was oddly silent in there. I can't remember why, but every so often I'd look behind me. I'm not sure what was scaring me, but I remember just wanting to get out of there as quickly as possible. After another few minutes, I started to pick up on a faint rustling sound coming from the corn just a little ways off the path. I stopped and listened, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. It didn't sound like the wind, though. It stopped, but as soon as I started walking, I heard it again. This time, it was a little louder and a little closer. I started to think it could have been an animal stalking me, but I didn't know what kind of animal would be making that much noise. I remember struggling to breathe, wishing I had never gotten into that cornfield at all. I picked up the pace, walking faster, but I didn't want to leave my bike behind. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, but every few minutes, the rustling came back. Like whatever it was keeping pace with me. Eventually, the rustling stopped, and I felt a wave of relief. Maybe 10 or so minutes passed without any strange sounds. At the next juncture, I decided to switch rows just to be safe. I turned a corner, and standing right there in the middle of the path was a man. He was just standing there, arms at his sides, staring at me. He didn't look like a farmer or anyone who belonged out there. His clothes were dirty and torn, and he had what looked like long scratches on both arms. I don't know how else to describe them. They were just long marks that looked etched into his arm. I froze, not knowing what to do. But then he spoke. He asked me if I was lost in a low and raspy voice. I didn't respond. I was glued to the spot. He then took a step toward me and told me he'd help me find my way home. I felt like I was in sleep paralysis. I literally couldn't move. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but I couldn't. He started walking faster, his hands outstretched toward me, and that's when my legs just took over. I dropped my bike and ran as fast as I could. He started chasing me and shouted that he just wanted to help me. I did not stop running. I could hear him crashing through the corn behind me, yelling for me to stop every so often. I ducked into one of the corn stalks and crouched down in a ball with my eyes closed. I tried to make myself as small as possible. I truthfully thought I was gonna die. He was holding something that looked like a rope in his hand. As he passed, he muttered to himself, I'll find him. I'll never forget those words for as long as I live. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours. My legs were cramping and my whole body was trembling, but I didn't dare move until I was sure he was gone. When I finally crawled out of the corn and made my way home, I was shaking so badly I could barely walk. It was dark by then. I eventually found my way home. I ran inside to my parents, who were worried sick about where I had been. I told them everything. My mom was in tears, and my dad looked like he was ready to kill someone. By then, though, there wasn't much they could do. That man was long gone. My dad went out to look for my bike, but it was nowhere to be found. They got me a new one a few days later, and life went on. A few weeks later, something else happened that ultimately made us move out. I got home from school one day, and there, sitting on the porch, was my old bike. The one I had left in the cornfield. I don't remember who was more freaked out, me or my parents. My parents didn't feel safe with me in that house anymore, so we quickly moved out of there. My parents don't really mention what happens, but I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it.